Hi, I'm William Stewart. Welcome back to our Bible study, verse by verse, on the book of Matthew. We are in chapter 24, an exciting chapter talking about the return of Christ. We've covered really the first half of the tribulation and the abomination of desolation at the midpoint. And now we really come to the second half of the tribulation. So you remember the tribulation, the time chronology here, church age, the rapture, where God comes for his people to take them into heaven, removing true believers from earth for the terrible period of judgment, the Great Tribulation, 7 years before the return of Christ. Today we discuss the approach to the return of Christ in the last 3.5 years. Let's go to the text, verse 21. For then, so following the abomination of desolation and the Jews having to flee Jerusalem, there shall be a great tribulation. So this is part of the tribulation, is the 7 years described in Daniel chapter 9 at the end of the chapter. And oftentimes the last 3.5 years, as is described here, is called the Great Tribulation, such as was not the beginning, or not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor shall never be. Otherwise, it's a terror from God's judgment that the world has never known before or in the future. And except those days be shortened, there should be no flesh saved. The death rate is just incredible. And this is described in the book of Revelation more vividly. But for the elect's sakes, those days shall be shortened. So otherwise, the 144,000 that were chosen to spread the gospel in the tribulation, I think there were those that probably came to know Christ. They were also elected. We know from other scripture, all people who believe have to be chosen, elected. Otherwise, they wouldn't come. So to prevent their suffering, these days are shortened by God's mercy. Verse 23, then if any man shall say to you, lo, here is Christ, for there, believe it or not. So lies, people will be looking for hope. And, excuse me, so people will come saying they're Christ, and people will look to them for some sort of hope and say to another person, here's the Christ. Verse 24, for there shall arise Christ and false prophets, and show signs and wonders. They will deceive the very elect. So they'll be very susceptible because of hope put into these people. Verse 25, behold, I have told you before. Verse 26, wherefore if they shall say to you, behold, he is in the desert, go not there. Behold, in the secret chambers, believe it not. Otherwise, this is not how Christ will come. As in the Old Testament, Christ's coming was prophesied. Here's further prophecy about the coming of Christ. And here's how it will come. Verse 27. For as the lightning, come out of the east and shineth unto the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So what does this teach us about the coming of Christ, Son of Man? It'll be from heaven, from up in the sky. It'll be quick. It'll be sudden, just like lightning. It'll come from east to west. What does this mean? Well, I don't know exactly. There are very good podcasts, Bible Talk, which is that holds Scripture as authoritative and is going through the Old Testament, has talked about a theme in Scripture of east to west, east being generally bad, west being generally good. So we look and see that the Garden of Eden, the entry was on the east, so a person would enter the Garden of Eden, supposedly, from east to west. Abraham came from the east to the west on the calling of God. Israel entered Canaan specifically in Joshua going east across the Jordan to the west. After the exilic period in Babylon, people returned to Judea east to west, and the wise men came east to west. Is there a theological basis for this? I can't think of any. I don't know that yet, but it's just there as a thought that seems to be a pattern in Scripture. But Christ will come suddenly. That is a very strong theme of Scripture, unexpectedly, especially in the book of Revelation. And that's how we'll know. Verse 28, for wherever the carcass is, there will be eagles gathered together, which I think is another sign of the great judgment of Christ and at his coming. Could this be the Battle of Armageddon mentioned in Revelation 16? Maybe. It doesn't say that specifically, but there is signs of judgment. Okay, we've come to the return of Christ. We'll discuss this more next time in more detail. The end of the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, called the Great Tribulation, where God has poured his wrath upon the earth. I hope these studies, these videos are useful to you. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.